Before animating is even a twinkle in the eye of the animator, the model needs to go through an extensive setup process, from building a skeleton, setting constraints and skinning right through to rigging. It's a discipline that requires its own job description. In general, the term rigging covers all the steps needed to prepare a model for animation, even though it's an actual step in the process itself. In this course, we're going to cover the basic first steps of the process: building the skeleton, adding constraints, and skinning, or attaching the model to the skeleton. In order to build a skeleton for Frank the Bear, we're going to create a skeleton chain. So what exactly is a skeleton chain anyway? Well, let me give you an example. First of all, let me switch to an orthographic view, and I'll switch to the rigging menu set, just to make things a little easier. Under the skeleton menu, select Create Joints, Options. Okay, I'm going to tear off the tool settings here, move them to the right side. As always, I'll reset the tool first, and set orientation settings to none. Actually, let me close that window for now. Alright, so all I need to do is click and click again over here to create the first bone, and then hit return to complete. If we open the hypergraph, we can see how the two joints are comprised of two nodes in a hierarchy: joint 2 and joint 1. Okay, so far so good. I'll close the hypergraph for now. Now, if I want to add joints, I can either select the tool on the left here or press the Y key. Left click on the last joint, click again to add another joint, then again to add another. If I want to move that last joint placement, I can just middle mouse button click and drag it. And if we look in the hypergraph again, we can see all 4 joints. So that's what's known as a skeleton chain. One thing to note here, the orientation of the joints is important. Why is it so important? Well, orientation affects how the joints rotate, which is crucial to how the whole skeleton chain moves. By using automatic orientation, which I've used here, Maya does the work for you and aligns the joints based on something called the right hand rule. Now, this method doesn't always provide the orientation we want, but we can change that later on if and when necessary. Okay, so back to the tool settings, and if we check Orient Joint to World and create a new chain, we can see how those new joints are now aligned with the world frame. In other words, orientated along the world axis. Let's go into perspective view and take another look at those joints. We can see how the joints are aligned to point down the bone towards the next joint. Alright, back to the left side orthographic view, and I'll just delete these. Okay. And this time we'll use the top orthographic view. With the joint tool active, I'll just uncheck Orient Joint to World and set the primary to X and secondary to Y. And click to create a joint chain. Okay. Now, if I press the up arrow on the keyboard, I can traverse back up the chain. And when I click again, I'm now adding joints to a root joint, sort of like tree branches. Step back up the chain, and I can add more. If you haven't guessed already, we're creating the bones and joints for a hand. Stepping back up the chain all the way to the shoulder, I'll just hit the X key to snap to grid, which is also accessed with this icon here. Actually, I should mention it's a toggle, so I'll hold down the X key and add another bone right here. Okay, I'm done with the joint tool, so press enter or return to exit. Now, the last joint I added here, we want to be our spine or our new root, but we'll have to specify that it's the root joint first. So under the skeleton menu, select Reroute Skeleton. Now, if this is the left arm, do we have to go through the whole process again for the right? Well, luckily, no. Just select the root again, actually the shoulder. Then under the skeleton menu, select Mirror Joints, Options. We want to mirror across the YZ plane, so I'll select that and hit mirror. As if by magic, the entire arm is mirrored to the right. So now we've got the basics down, let's apply that to creating a skeleton for Frank.